Hey, everybody. I'm super excited about this conversation that I'm having with some professionals in the industry. And I love the fact that, alumni do come back and they do share their perspective. And first, I wanted to just really thank Rich. I connected with them earlier in the semester and we really had a conversation. And I was just asking, I was like, man, you got some real insight. How can we translate this over to where students can have access to this? And this is how we collaborated and came up with this panel. So thank you for getting these wonderful panelists to have this conversation. And I'm just super excited about it. This will be recorded. So just FYI, if you have any questions, please share it in the chat. We'll have somebody that will, address it. And if it's pressing and if it's fitting, we definitely will allow your voice to be heard. So we'll have somebody read it and ask the panelists. So don't be afraid to ask no questions. This is the time to really get to know the people and get your answers. And then I'm going to introduce my co-leads before we introduce the panel. I am super honored to work with these two ladies. Lindsay, I met this week, and I just was astounded by the questions she asked some of her older peers. And I was like, I gotta have you on here because you just have great, inquisitive, curious questions that really guides the conversation. And Mackenzie, I met you over the summer, and we've just been rocking ever since, collaborating on certain events, and just really love your insight and what you have to share. But if y'all can introduce yourself real quickly, we'll have the panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll get started with this conversation. I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Mackenzie Bryce. I am a junior at University of North Texas. I'm a digital and broadcast journalism student. And I've also been involved in North Texas Television in the past, as well as being a news writer for North Texas Daily and a writer for the UN Talk podcast show.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Boucher. I'm a sophomore here at UNT. I've been involved in North Texas Television. One of our shows actually won a Lone Star Emmy. Congratulations, Christian. And we actually, I grew up being an actress and then transitioned into film when I found audio and video. So I'm just really excited to get to talk to you guys and get a better understanding of the entertainment industry and what students can do to be successful.
Awesome. So now here's my first question to introduce the panelists. If you could just say your name, your profession, and there's one thing that you love the most about your career.
So guys, my name is Richard Seth Biley. Most of you guys will know me as Seth. I kind of do a little bit of everything. Mainly at this point, I do sports freelancing and corporate media on the side at this point. The best thing I love about my job is just waking up and doing something different every day. And that's kind of what I enjoy the most.
I'll jump in. So I'm Daniela. I am a multimedia journalist, which means I shoot, write, and edit my own stories every day. In Tulsa, Oklahoma. I just started here 4 months ago. I was in West Texas before. And then one thing that I love most about my job, and it's going to be different than Seth's because that's what I was going to say, is that I honestly like the stress of it. I like working under the pressure. It just drives me for whatever reason.
Hi, my name's Ken Jones. I'm a video producer for the city of Richardson, and I do freelance production, freelance sports a lot. I do some writing. And the thing I love about this business is the people that you get to be involved with and the people you get to hang out with. They're some of my best friends in the world, and I love working with a big crew on stuff.
Hey, y'all, my name is Andrew Tate. I am a weather forecaster at KLTV7 in Tyler. And my favorite part of my job is getting to serve the community every day. It's really cool to give back to people.
Boo.
I was like, man, I love UNT alumni. I love it. I love it. So Rich, you mentioned, doing something new, stress, just working under pressure and that stress that comes with it, serving the community, and then Ken, just meeting new people and working with people you love. a beautiful thing. Now, I know with students, sometimes they, in college, they have a hard time trying to find their career and their path. Like my question to you, how did you know that your current profession is the career path that you wanted to choose? What was that experience, and like, how did you know like this is what I wanted to do?
So I can take that one first. I know everybody's kind of got a different experience on this one. I actually was going to be an engineering student, and I got a few scholarships to go to some different schools across the country. And my senior year of high school, I joined the television program in Lubbock, Texas, and I started doing stuff over there. And kind of tagging into what everybody has already mentioned, is it was just a lot of fun. I really enjoyed being under the pressure that TV involved, and kind of getting to work with a crew of people and just do stuff. That's kind of when I was like, okay, I could really see myself doing this. Hopefully there's money involved. So definitely that's when I kind of fell in love with it, and I came to UNT. So I've never really struggled like a lot of other people with finding that career. What I've struggled with is what I know a lot of other media arts students struggle with, is picking the right avenue, whether that's news, sports, or entertainment. So that's kind of where my struggle's been. I ruled entertainment out right away because I don't think I'm creative enough for that. So then it's always been a toss-up between news and sports. And just the way that everything's going, I'm kind of sliding more into sports than news. And that's kind of where things are going with me. And one of the things that I kind of want to preach to all students is be flexible. It just because you're going into one thing doesn't mean you won't do another thing later. I mean, a lot of people know me as I was the news director at the TV station, or I was the operations manager at one point, but none of that really set me up to work in sports. And that's kind of where I'm going to be hopefully at in the future. So it's all about being flexible and taking opportunities as they're given to you.
I've always known what I wanted to do. When I was 6, I wrote a story and sent it into the old PBS show Zoom, and they put it on. And that was the highlight of my career, and everything else is just kind of tucked in behind it. When I tell people what I do, whether it's writer, producer, camera, director, whatever, my business card says storyteller, because that's what this job is, no matter which aspect of it I'm taking part of. And I enjoy and love being a storyteller, and it's just ingrained in who I am. So I knew from an early age what I wanted to do. And if, we laughed that, a few years ago, me and a couple other North Texas guys, we were producing the first season of the WNBA's Dallas Wings team. And I looked at them and I said, well, guys, just like we always figured, here we are producing women's basketball professionally. And, we laughed because that was never even on the radar back in the day. If you squint and look at it, if you add it all up, it looks like a real legitimate career. But it is. It's doing a little bit of everything and figuring out what you're good at, and the stuff you're not good at, figuring out who you can partner with because they are good at it.
That's good. What about you?
I'll go. So the way I ended up where I'm at is this is actually my second or third job, however you want to look at it, since graduating in 2019. I did an internship at NBC5 in the Metroplex while I was a junior and senior, and interned in their meteorology department. And then when I graduated, they offered me a part-time job to be their weather producer. And then to kind of make it a full-time job, I was also their part-time helicopter traffic photographer. And so I did that for a year. And then our friend, the coronavirus, came around. And last November, I got laid off and ended up getting the opportunity to come to Tyler. And I think the big lesson in that is being flexible. I mean, I graduated and couldn't get a full-time job, but I got 2 part-time jobs that paid me like I was full-time. And when the right time came around, I was offered the full-time job here in Tyler that came around when I needed that new position.
Danny, you're muted.
I know, I just got the notification, sorry. For me, I think I've always knew I wanted to be a journalist. Like my aunt joked, like I'm sure it exists, but I don't remember taping it ever, but she said I made like a newscast when I was like 6, and she thought it was the cutest thing ever. And like I've always been interested in news, like as a military kid. That's the one thing that's been constant for me. But when I got to high school, I was like, okay, that's probably not realistic for me. Let me do like CSI or forensic stuff, which is also not realistic now that I like know that I'm awful at science and math. But I've always loved writing, and finally, when I became a senior, my professor or my teacher at the time was like, you're really good at writing, and you're pretty nosy, so you should probably look into this. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And then I went to UNT, and then UNT just set that for me, especially NTTV. I remember my first live shot was actually with Andrew and Seth. And then from that moment on, I just kind of knew like, okay, like I like this. It's stressful. It's not the same every day. I think I want to do this forever.
Man, love that. Now, what a common theme that I've been hearing is being flexible. And we all know that this pandemic switched a lot of things. Even Andrew, you mentioned it, like you lost your job, had to work 2 jobs, then when the opportunity came. And I know through all of that, sometimes we experience anxiety, we experience fear, we experience those undesirable feelings and emotions that we had. And that could translate over to finding a career, opportunities not happening for you, not setting yourself up for success. And then I'm thinking of all these things. Did y'all ever have a point in y'all career? I know now that y'all made it, at a point in y'all career where y'all were anxious, where y'all were afraid, where y'all were uncertain about certain things that were happening. Like I'm questioning even if this profession is the direction I need to go, because I think a lot of students experience that. And I just wanted to peel back the layers and see, have y'all felt that way at some point throughout y'all career?
For me, I've never doubted that I wanted to go into news specifically. There was a period where I wasn't sure exactly what news I wanted to do. I was debating between being a producer because I like the control of like getting to, shape a show. But I also knew I would be bored sitting at my desk every day. Like now that I work from home all the time, like it kills me. Like I just want to play with my dog all the time. And I miss actually being out in the field all the time. So that's kind of why I knew I wanted to be a reporter, even though like producing everything's like, and reporting everything's kind of the same. Like, you have to turn a story by X amount of time, but I like talking to new people every day and thinking a little bit harder. Not that producing doesn't make you think harder, but you are in the comforts of AC and, just a more controlled environment.
I would say that I haven't made it. Everybody else here has a real job, and I'm somewhere in between, definitely. So I'm actually still at school getting my master's right now, but I'm in flux, I would say, because my time at the TV station is coming to an end. And now I have to grow up and get something that's legitimate while I do these other freelancing things and everything else along those lines, because the time's quickly coming. I'm going to turn 26 and I have to get real healthcare somewhere. So that's on my radar. But so one of the things, and Andrew and I, even when we worked together back in the day, the biggest thing that we always did is probably stress too much. And we would always come up with like 4 to 5 plans that could ever happen for any specific job or type of thing or anything else. I mean, Andrew could probably talk about this in a minute. I think weather was one of his many options that could have came up for him. But I mean, the biggest thing I could say is it's okay to be anxious. It's okay to stress, but the worst thing you could do is try and feel paralyzed. There's always somebody that can help you, whether that's like a mentor or a friend or even a coworker or anything under the sun. As long as you are looking for help and thinking of new ideas and just trying to take one step forward, you're always going to be making progress. So I think that's my biggest advice for any student is keep trying to chug through it, because anxiety is something that's going to hit you in any job. And anything in life that's worth doing, you're going to have some anxiety over. So I think as long as you're just like trying to push forward, you're going to get there eventually.
I would echo that. When I found out I was getting laid off, I was terrified, and there was a week of uncertainty. And I thought, should I go into corporate communications? And then I had offers to do traffic reporting in Nebraska or be a reporter in Montana, but I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to do weather. And for me, it was worth waiting for that opportunity. And I think that if you want to do this job, whatever you want to do in this business, if you can wait for it, wait for it. But there's also a lot of ways to do this job. If you want to be a storyteller, but you don't care if you're shooting video for a TV station or a corporation, you can tell stories for anybody, shoot video, edit. I mean, they may not call it an MMJ, but you could be an MMJ for Cigna Healthcare Company, making commercials for them or internal video communication.
Well, and coming from a government background for 25 years now, let me tell you, I envied my friends who were doing full-time sports stuff. But as full-time freelancers, which all of them are, I always laughed and said, I'm too big of a coward to go do full-time sports freelance. It turns out a pandemic is an incredibly good time to be a coward, because I was here every day. We stayed open. The government's going to stay open. There are so many avenues, and you've got to get out there and find your ways. And I've got friends who do a ton of sports production, but that's not their full-time job. They just do it as a hobby that pays. You find your ways. If, one of my favorite stories is the guys who did Jimmy Neutron, the animated series. They did that all the very first stuff that they did. During the day, they were an advertising agency and they worked for the clients and they made boring stuff. And at night, they did all this irreverent stuff that they put out in film festivals, and eventually it turned into Jimmy Neutron, and they had their own DNA studios here in Dallas. And they figured out a way. There are so many things. When I was at North Texas, I looked at film and just getting into film. And one of the things I liked about video production was film. You're a very specialized person in a niche thing. You are this person. In video production, you're the writer, you're the producer, you're the editor, sometimes you're the talent. You learn a little bit of everything. And I love doing a little bit of everything and knowing that if I'm not doing video production anymore, I can go and find writing clients and I can write for them anywhere they need storytellers, like Andrew said.
I have a question real quick. So I know, Ken, you were talking about, figuring out a way, finding a way to kind of fulfill your passion. And then Seth, you were talking about how you are a master's student as well as, managing a TV station. What would you say to students who are still really passionate about media arts or journalism, but don't necessarily have time to participate in organizations, say if they have a job, if they're working? How can they still get a head start on their career?
There's all sorts of groups and clubs, and guess what? Everybody's got their own mobile studio these days. If you want to do storytelling, go do it. I know I think 48-hour film festival, 24-hour film festival was just this past weekend. Austin Film Festival was going on this weekend, and they had script writing panels and 10 days worth of films. There are tons of ways to get involved. And guess what? As a young person getting into the field, Seth and I do FC Dallas together on game day production. The first 2 seasons I did FC Dallas, I did it for free for them. Now, I got to hang out on the field and watch soccer, which was a good enough trade-off. You will find places where you do free things, you volunteer, you jump in, and a lot of times those will either lead to a paying gig or lead to the connections you need to get a paying gig.
And here's the hard answer that everybody hates to hear, I'd also say, is you see the bags under my eyes. You got to work sometimes even when you really don't want to. When you really want to go in and sit in your bed and do nothing, you got to really put yourself out there. I mean, there's some days where it's like a 13, 14-hour day and you just got to do it. You got to bite the bullet because it's what you're passionate about. And if you're truly passionate, I mean, yes, I'm still tired at the end of the day. And I sometimes am like, why do I do this to myself? But then I look back and I'm like, wow, we did that. That's great. I can't believe we did something like that. We did all this hard work and it paid off. I might not have gotten paid for all of it. I might not have done all this. This might not be giving me $100,000 right now as a 25-year-old. You just got to do what you got to do, because and the experience will pay off. I mean, there's jobs for our industry. You just got to find where they are. But like Ken was saying, it's the experiences. I mean, one of the really good things I can say is my whole life, or TV career, not life, has been a kind of one connection leads to another connection, which leads to another connection into another connection. I mean, the whole reason I know Ken is because I knew Ashley Pickle at the TV station. She got me in working at Fox Sports Southwest as a high school football photographer. Then I met an engineer at Fox Sports Southwest who came up to me at 11:30 at night, and he said, "Hey, do you know anything about basketball? We need a timeout coordinator tomorrow." And I was like, "I love basketball. Where at?" He goes, "Well, we need somebody at the Texas Legends." So I went out to the Texas Legends, where Ken is the producer. And I was like, "Hey, I've never done this before. What do I need to do?" He talked me through it. And I did a whole season with them of being a timeout coordinator on the sideline. And now, thanks to knowing Ken, I get to go work FC Dallas games with him. And all of these connections, all these people you work with, they all kind of cascade and they kind of get you somewhere eventually. So that's my biggest advice, is pushing through the hard work and the extra time and putting it in. That will get you somewhere. And there's always ways to do that, whether you're shooting on an iPhone or applying for a script writing competition or just showing up for that one extra thing a week. It will help you.
And to echo that, do all these things now while y'all are young, because I've got shoes that are older than Seth. And once you have a spouse and once you have kids, your priorities mandatorily will change. And your time will get further divided. So if you can put in those long days now and those opportunities where you're maybe not getting something tangible, do it. And secondly, the biggest thing I always preach to everybody in this business, you think Dallas-Fort Worth is a giant community, and it is. But the radio, TV, film, media groups know each other. And, Seth came to us on Legends. Seth absolutely killed the job we needed him to do. I did not have a hesitation when I needed somebody at FC Dallas to bring him in. This year, we needed some extra people at FC Dallas. I went to Seth and said, "Who you got?" And he's brought a couple more in. This entire business works on the rails of relationships.
And because y'all brought up a great point of connecting with people, building relationships, and networking. That's broad type of terms. When we talk about those things, people throw that out. But if you can give me a specific story of networking, like how was it effective when I connected with this person, I produced something that they really value and they just drawn to me, or I reached out to this person. These are some of the things that I said and I followed up with them. Like, what is those key tips within networking or these broad terms that we can take with us and apply to our career journey?
I've always wanted to be a writer. About 1 million years ago, I went to a Dallas screenwriters meeting. I liked the organization. I joined the organization. They needed officers. I got on the board with the officers. The year I was president, the guy who was vice president was executive producer here at City of Richardson. I've been here 25 years now because I joined as a member and saw a need and jumped onto the board and volunteered my time and was secretary for a couple of years and then president for a couple of years. And again, it's putting yourself out there, finding things you like to do, and you'd never know where they're going to lead.
I kind of have a roundabout story. That my biggest issue is I'm a coward, and I really don't like putting myself out there without having something to say. So I've never really had the courage to reach out to somebody and be like, "Hey, this is who I am. You should put me on your show," or something. Or, "Hey, this is who I am. I really want to connect with you." There are a lot of people that do that and do that well, and I'm not one of them. I feel like I have a very gruff personality, so I don't want to just like shove myself in someone else's face. So what I try and do is when I get on a job, I do my job as best as I can, and I don't complain and I don't say anything. And then when I'm done, I'm like, hey, do you have any notes for me? I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for having me out. And I do my 9 yards at the end after I've done something. And then somebody hopefully will like me enough to bring me back to that job or put me somewhere else. But my other thing I do is I try and always look out for my friends and the people I know that work hard. So whenever somebody comes to me with, hey, I've got this opportunity, are you the person for this? If I say no, which happens often, I try and think of the 3 or 4 other people I know that are trying to get stuff like this right behind me, who've got just the same skills and they're looking for a big break or they just need a job or something. I try and think of those people and the people I trust. So sometimes it's not always networking with a boss. It's just networking with people you know who are your friends and trying to build the community around you who have people that are like minds. Definitely.
Just talking about networking for me, it's not necessarily like it has come in handy for like all the jobs I've gotten are because of my mentor. She always knew someone who worked at the station that I worked at. Like this one, she used to work with the news director who hired me, and then the one before was her producer back when she worked in Dallas. But going with networking, I try to network every week, almost every day, honestly. Twitter is literally my best friend. I know people like LinkedIn, but like I'll scroll through it, but like for whatever reason I get all the the memes on LinkedIn. So I don't really like spend as much time on there as I should. But literally like when I was in school, I would I'd cold DM reporters who I respected. And the worst thing that they would happen is they either wouldn't respond or just brush you off. But more often than not, people would always respond to me and they'd be more than willing to give me feedback on stories or any questions I have. And literally I could do it right now. And I know they'd get back to me just because, I made that initial step.
I would kind of echo that in the sense that taking advantage of opportunities. Like I met 3 or 4 years before he ever hired me and had an opening that I could fill. I went to an event kind of like this that was in person, had a one-on-one with him and told him what I wanted to do. And he knew who I was, but 3-4 years later, when he had an opening, it wasn't a cold call or an email from someone he had never met before. We had spoken. And so that already, I think, kind of gets you ahead because you know somebody and they are familiar with your work from whether it's 6 months ago or 3 years ago, and gets you in that door, I think, a little easier. So taking advantage of an event like be on Zoom or in person, because UNT has speakers and guests come all the time, get involved with that stuff.
Well, and I will say that very rarely do I go to a network, do I do networking where I'm looking for a job that day or expecting a cold calling somebody. I cold called somebody a few weeks ago about production stuff, and I know them tangentially, and they didn't have any interest in me that day because they didn't need me right then. You're much better off working connections. We had a high school kid a couple of years ago in Texas Legends who didn't ask for a job. He asked if he could come sit in the truck and watch what we do. You bet. We let him do it. We love showing off. Everybody here loves showing off what they do. We brought him in. He sat in the truck. He said, hey, can I come back again? I said, sure, pick a date. We'll come back. Came back again. Came back a third time. And guess what? That day, one of our camera ops had a car accident, wasn't going to make it. I looked at him and said, can you run handheld camera under the basket? He said, sure. Whether he could or not, I didn't know at that point. Let's go. Get him out there. My buddy Robbie trained him up and we used him for a couple of games. It's very much being available. When I talked to Seth's class last year, I told them networking is key. One person in that class reached out, connected with me on LinkedIn, which I don't love LinkedIn either. I'm old, so I like Facebook until they change the name next week or whatever. But he connected with me, told me love sports. Guess what? I've gotten him in to do some FC Dallas games this year. You're not connecting looking for a job. You're connecting to make those connections. And then when a job comes open, they may remember you.
And Andrew, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Andrew also did a lot of research that helped him get where he wanted to go and know about the industry. Like, Andrew, tell me about like all the stuff you looked at, because I know you've told me like 10 million market statistics about stuff that doesn't matter.
I'm when I can't sleep at night, I read Wikipedia, so I know a little bit about everything. But like KWQC is the NBC station in the Quad Cities of Illinois and Iowa. They're Channel 6. So stuff like that is what Seth is referring to. I wouldn't say that helped me get a job as much as just being willing to put in time and work and being able to show that you know what you're doing.
So would y'all say that networking is greater than just simply applying?
Yes.
100%.
And that's what I'll be trying to emphasize. That's what I'll be networking. I know that's why I was like, I have to ask this question just so we can reiterate the fact that networking is important. But a common theme that I see is that you take opportunities when it's given to you and you add value whenever you can.
And also, like, I want to add to that because, like, I wanted to come to Tulsa for whatever reason. I had never been here before I moved here, but I knew this is where I wanted to work. So I literally reached out to every news director here in this market. Like, I applied, and there was a station here that I didn't really want to go to, but I applied anyways. And I still emailed them, but you know, it wasn't as like full force as I did with one news director who I ultimately didn't end up at that station, but I applied, and then literally like a day or two later, I emailed them. And I honestly did a little bit of stalking. Like, I looked up where they were from to see like what we had in common. That way, when I emailed them, I like had stuff that I could talk to them about. And that's what worked. I got a job offer because I did that. And literally when he offered, so the news director was from Austin and I'm San Antonio, and you know, there's that rivalry. So he's like, I know you're from San Antonio, but I still want you to work for me. And then he offered me the job just because I did that email.
Man, added historical knowledge. You did research and then plugged it in and seen the connection. And then look, you was able to get an opportunity. I love that. Now, here's a question. And then I hope, you know, my students, I know they burning with some stuff. So I just have a question, like, now that you've been in the career, ever since you've been to college, and now you in your profession and where you at. And Rich, you know, I see that you kind of still in the middle. But what have changed your mind since then, since college? What have you changed your mind on? And it's a broad question, either in your career, either in whatever. What have really changed your mind set being a professional versus being a college student?
If I can jump in again, just like, and I'm still kind of struggling with this, but like, kind of going off what Seth said, like, you know, when you're a student, you want to do every single opportunity you can, even if you don't get paid for it. But now that I'm a paid professional, I've tried to scale back how much I work outside of work just because it's not healthy. And like, trust me, like at my first job, literally I was on my phone all the time. And now I have 2 phones. So that makes it a lot easier. So, and like in college, like you can ask Seth and Andrew, I would literally be working all the time. Like, and like, it's fun to me, but now that, like I said, now that I'm a professional, like I know it's not healthy. And also, you know, here, at least with COVID, a lot of stations, you get in trouble for doing overtime. So like as a journalist, you do have to work a little bit outside, but I've learned to like limit how much I work and respect my time a lot more, if that makes sense. I know it's kind of a ramble, but
No, that was good. That was good.
For me, one of the things that I always heard in school was, you know, you have to start in a small market, which in television, I think there's 210, 212.
207.
207. Okay. So there's just over 200 markets in the television business, and people try to work in a larger market. So New York would be one. And I think a lot of people will put aside their happiness to work in a smaller market just to get in and get a job. And so that was kind of my mentality, at least while I was in school, was, you know, I'm going to be unhappy and work somewhere I don't want to live just to get that job. But now that I've been in the business, I didn't take a job where I didn't want to live. I like where I live. And I think that's a big thing that took some time to learn in the time after graduation, and to where I got was, don't go to a market just because you need a job and you may not be happy there. Make sure that you're going to be happy wherever you're taking that first job or second job or wherever the job is, because your happiness outside of work will affect how well you do your job when you're at work.
The biggest things I think are, he's talking about be happy. And again, I'm doing government video, and I do some good things, and I do some good projects, and I do some pretty awful projects that are talking heads, and they're talking about, a great place to live, work, and play, and find the balance of projects. Now, I have no idea what Danny's talking about, not taking every job. That's crazy. No, I'm kidding. I've always taken way too many jobs, but this is my hobby. It's not only my career, it's my hobby. It's what I want to do. And I enjoy, there is nothing more enjoyable to me than working a sporting event on the weekends. I've put in 40 hours here. I've done the parenting. I've done my, married life and homeowner and all that. And I still want to go and hang out with my friends, because I freelance work. I've been lucky that I can work with the people I like, and hang out with my friends on headset, and we shoot a football game or we shoot a basketball game. The other thing is technology, obviously, since I went to college, has changed. The truth is, the day you graduate college, the technology you learned on is obsolete. So learn a skill that doesn't absolutely require the technology, unless you love the technology. If you're one of those bleeding edge people who then embrace it, that's your skill set and you know it. I didn't love the technology. It doesn't matter what the technology is, as long as I can tell my stories. I'll learn enough of the technology or find someone who's good at it to tell the stories. But storytelling is a skill that doesn't change with technology. Whether it's, a short film or a Vine or a TikTok or whatever, or a feature-length film, it's still storytelling.
I have a question for the panel. So you guys have been talking about, applying for jobs and getting the different jobs that you got after graduation. I was just wondering, how did you guys construct your creative resumes? What kind of work, when you guys are looking like for candidates that you like to see? And where do you guys keep all of that so that, when someone asks, hey, what do you do? You're able to actually show them, what you've worked on and the things that, you're capable of.
So one of the things that I do, and again, I'm somewhere in the middle, a resume truly hasn't helped me in the ways that I wish it would. Most of my jobs have all come from networking, and there's been a few times where I've gotten actual jobs by applying for them, and they're like, oh, I don't really care about your resume. And I'm like, really though? Really? I put a lot of work into that resume. Please look at it. But I try and highlight all my stuff because I have a website, richardbiley.com, and that's kind of what I try to maintain and put my latest work on there. Sometimes that's just so that if somebody asks, I can hand them my business card, because I carry those around as well, and then be like, hey, this is my portfolio, look here. That way, because again, sometimes for me, it's not always about looking for a job, it's looking for a client. But I have like 400 resumes. I still have my first resume, and I've updated it every time as I go. So I have a number of them that I keep on my laptop at all times, ready to send out. I have one on my website that doesn't have phone numbers and addresses on it, so that people can see that. I have a long format one for whenever I'm applying for some random thing in the education world where they need a long format resume talking about projects. I have a really short one when I'm sending it to someone that I know really doesn't want a 3-page resume, and they're not going to read it because they work in news and they're going to be no BS. They need this now with the 3 things that they're looking for. So when it comes to resumes, I don't think they're all that. I think that what you do as an individual speaks more than the piece of paper. But I will say, you tailor your resume to what you're doing. So I definitely would keep that in mind and have multiple versions ready to go. I have one for news, for corporate more at this time than actual news. I have one for sports, and I have one that kind of just says a little bit of everything. So try and preemptively have some resumes that could open doors for you. But at the end, I still say networking is the key.
As a TV person, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
ahead, Ken.
go, Danny, go.
So as a TV person, our resume is our resume reel, which is, it's like the 5 or 7 minute clip of you basically showing that you can actually do the job. But for the paper resume, this last go around when I was applying for this job, I had 2 versions too. But I knew I was going to be a reporter, but I had one version that was like a printable version that, like if you have to like submit it online and it does like a little HR thing where it pulls random stuff. It was basic enough for it to read that. But I had a version when I did those emails, like the cold emailing to different news directors, I had a version where it was literally everything was hyperlinked. So if I said, oh, I like worked on this, I literally hyperlinked it in there to make it easy. But as someone who's on camera, like honestly, they just kind of look at your resume and say, oh, you have a college degree? Great. And sometimes they don't even do that. So
I have been here 25 years, so I haven't done a lot of resumes. I had a production resume and I had a writer's resume. And a couple of years ago, I was going to send the production resume off for something. I looked at it and I was like, well, I would hire me to direct a live event. I wouldn't hire me to be an executive producer. So I changed that up. But honestly, and this is not the case with news stations or with some of these things, every job I've gotten in sports, I've gotten because I've worked with people and I know people and I've been folded in. Every job I've gotten with writing, they may want to see a writer's resume, but they're much more interested in seeing writing samples. And so I can send them scripts that I've produced. I've got a job coming up, hopefully, because I was able to say, here are some scripts that were produced for clients. Here are some finished videos that I did that I didn't necessarily write a script on because I was producing, directing, and editing. And your work is going to prove what you can do more than a resume. There will be places, and if I was applying for this job today, they would need a resume because they're government, and businesses are going to be like that. They want that stuff, and they want a college degree, and you need to be able to have that because there are 10,000 places to go do production work, like we said. The ones I'm chasing generally don't care about a resume. And there's the point of, if you send them a demo reel of, one of our broadcasts, I mean, you can show them your camera work, but you're better off having a camera reel. It's tough to show them, I produced the heck out of that broadcast. Watch this 30 seconds and you'll see.
Yeah.
That was
It is-
helpful. Oh, go, sorry, Andrew.
I was just saying, I pretty much echo everything Daniela says as someone that's on camera versus behind. That for me, it's your resume reel that matters more than kind of what's on a piece of paper. They want to see, how do you do this, not what have you done.
Question. So I guess based off of Lindsay's talking about building your resume, things like that, how can we stand out from our competition on building, I guess, our entire portfolio for potential job offers?
I have 3 quick things, and then everybody else will have much better things to say. My biggest thing is like the small details matter. If you think that unless you think you're like, okay, for example, if you're on camera talent, things might be different. But if you think that you won't stand out as an individual, you do as much as you can in the little details. You make your resume as clean as possible, even if you think it won't help you. You get your portfolio to be as well designed as possible. Like, for example, I pay $20 a month to Squarespace, which a lot of people have told me is a huge waste of money, just so that at the end of my website, it doesn't say /wix.com free website. Stuff like that. I put a lot of work into on my demo reels, making sure the graphics, like just the random formatting at the front looks clean. It's the random stuff for me that makes me as an individual feel like I'm putting myself that little notch above somebody else, that hopefully, and again, I'm not an employer and I haven't heard this feedback directly, but hopefully somebody looks at my stuff and goes, wow, he put that much effort into his own demo reel. And then plus the demo reel hopefully speaks for itself too, that he'll put that much effort into my product when he joins my team. That's kind of the thing I try and do, is it's all about the small details.
My standard line is for sports production in this area. And, and once you get experience moving out and knowing other people, again, it's a small area. It's a small community of people. Every shoot I go on, I know the same people. And if you work really hard and you're a problem solver and you've got a good attitude, word will get around and you'll get hired. And if you have a lousy attitude and you're kind of difficult, apparently you still get hired, because I can list 3 or 4 people who do that and I have no idea how they're making a career out of it. But they've got people who love them. Everybody has 2 or 3 people that they love and nobody else in the business can stand, but they hire those 2 or 3 people. Just be, guess what? And this goes up to my age and down, put your phones away when it's time to work. Don't be getting a selfie that proves you were there, even though I've taught Seth that that's a valuable thing as well. Don't be checking your message. Don't do that kind of stuff. Get there, work, be available, solve the problems. If you're not working on something right then, learn something.
And I'm going to tag in real quick and then I'll let these guys talk about the news world. But kind of another thing that I've realized a lot doing sports freelance and kind of working at the TV station with a lot of volunteers is you really get ahead, even on the cheap jobs, the free jobs, if you, like Ken was saying, be a problem solver and offer help and you do these things. I know a lot of people, especially young students, I used to have this attitude too, that they go in and they treat it as if this were like a retail job. You go in, you do this. Oh, I could call out. I don't know about this. The problem, especially in sports freelance, is if you make a name for yourself as somebody that bails on a job or calls out, you don't have any guarantee anybody will call you back again. They probably won't. If you've become known as a flake, then you're off that crew. Now you're setting a negative reputation. And as everybody's been saying, is like, there's a small community. So if word gets around, you might not get any jobs for what you're talking about or wanting to do right now for a while. So like, put your phone down, show up, work hard, put in the extra time. When breakdown happens at the end of a shoot, try and carry as much stuff as you can, do as much as you can to be a good help. I mean, this summer I was working rodeo. I was a camera operator. One day I said, hey, do you think I could show up like 2 hours early? I don't need to get paid extra for it. I'll show up 2 hours early and help you guys set up. I want to learn about this. Well, after that, I went from being the camera operator where I was standing for 4 hours and my back would hurt every day to, oh, I get a nice cushy control room job. I get to sit and do graphics just because I put the effort in. And I think that's the biggest thing about our industry is you put the effort in, you'll go far. If you treat it as if this were a high school, like retail job that you can call in and out, it doesn't impact the corporate office's bottom line because you're just one small like cog in the system. In news, in sports, freelance production, all this stuff, you're an important cog in the team. And if you let the team down, the team isn't going to want you around. And it might cause some problems for you in the future. So my big note is try and put the effort in. And another good note, especially in sports, is like, if you're going to call out, make sure you have a solution. Try and find somebody to fill in for you right away so that you're not a problem. You might be you'd be like a net zero for your employer. You've canceled, you're like, I'm not coming, but I've got you someone who can do my job. I'm really sorry. I hope I'm back next week. So that's my big thing, is try not to be an issue. That's my ramble.
Going off on like building, like your question was like building like your like portfolio, right? Okay, so I know earlier I said I don't work for free, and that's still true. And what I mean by that is like so my shift's from like 9:30 to 6:30. If I'm still writing a web story at like 7 p.m., I'm counting that. But I really believe in volunteering. So I'm a member of NAHJ, which is the Hispanic Journalism Association. I'm a member of IRE. I'm on the board for SBJ, and that's all stuff I do for free because I believe in, you know, the importance of our industry and the importance of investing in people like you that are still like, you know, learning what they want to do. So if you do that stuff in college, like literally, you can ask Seth and Andrew. I was literally doing NAHJ stuff all the time. Like if you do things like that and show that you're invested in like, you know, bettering yourself and invested in bettering others who have a similar interest, I think that makes you stand out. And that's something I actually put on my resume. I put that I'm a member of all these organizations. And if like, I go to conferences every year, except with Corona, but I still do the virtual ones. I put those on my resume too. And I've learned from applying to jobs that helps me stand out because they appreciate that I took the extra time to, instead of going on vacation, I went to, I mean, it's like a vacation because they're like in tropical places, but you know, you go to these places to go and learn instead of, you know, hanging out and like actually being on vacation.
I would say that you can help set yourself ahead or distinguish yourself as with the opportunities that you have right now. What can you do differently than like your peers? So an example of that for me is in college, I didn't really want to go into sports broadcasting, but I had the experience from high school AV production that I worked for North Texas Athletics for 4 years, for 2.5 years doing video production, running cameras and replay for them. And then halfway through my junior year, I was promoted and moved over to the marketing, and I ran the Jumbotron at all the athletic events. And through that, they had me become the athletic department graphic designer. How does graphic design have anything to do with my job? Well, Channel 5 in Dallas, when I was interning for them, they saw that I made really good looking weather graphics. So at the end of the internship, they hired me to be their weather producer, which is basically the weather graphic designer. Transition that to now, I make a lot of weather graphics every day for my job. So taking what you have available to you right now, whether it is related to what you want to do, but gaining skills in that can translate to what you eventually want to do. It makes you like the Swiss Army knife of whatever job you want.
That's so good, man. Y'all been giving wonderful advice. I have one burning question, and then we can wrap it up with just your final advice, you know, whatever you want to leave the audience with, and then we could just end it off like that. But there are students that's in this industry, because I feel like this industry, especially with media arts, a person have to possess an entrepreneurial spirit. And sometimes whenever they get to a certain place, they might want to change or, you know, change directions or whatever. So what value does media arts bring to other alternative jobs? If y'all know of any, maybe y'all have some friends that switch jobs and went somewhere else. Like, what are some of those jobs that they're thriving at because of their experience with media arts and journalism?
Just speaking from like my TV friends, I have, out of my graduating class, I think maybe like 3 or 4 of us actually work in TV. But so a lot of the skills are transferable. A lot of them work for like a city. I think I have a friend that works at the city of Louisville, and she makes a lot of videos for them. I have another friend who does social media for, I think it's Little Elm. So, I mean, the skills that you learn, like just because you like are like, you know, a visual medium doesn't mean you have to actually work on TV or work with film. Like you can make things that matter that, you know, go out to the community, like Ken says he does. And like I have friends that, or actually here in Tulsa, a lot of our public information officers were former reporters. And so they know what it's like when we reach out to them. They'll actually get back to us in time for our deadline. They know that we need video. They know that we need sound by a certain time. And they get paid like triple what I make now, and they work less.
I was going to say that every reporter I've known along the way eventually gets a little tiresome doing the April 15th tax deadline story and the safe neighborhoods trick-or-treating story. And you see, you know, and I don't blame them. Every one of them ends up going to be a spokesperson for a city or a police department They end up in PR for a company. Every company, every entity, city, state, national, needs storytellers, needs somebody who can relate their objectives and their goals to the public. And a lot of times you will be doing graphics and you will be doing on camera, and you, by the way, need to write the blurb that goes along with it, and you're going to make the social media post. There's a lot of one-person shops around Texas in the city level where they need to have a little bit of all the skills. Have all the skills, and that way, if you're suddenly done being a video producer for right now, I feel like I could go be a writer for somebody right now because I've kept those skills up. Learn to do as much as you can. It's one of the things I've liked about this industry is there are 1,000 ways to make a living in this industry.
My quick note for anybody who is watching this and is like, I sometimes do this and I get burned out and I kind of plateau. One of the things that I've always tried to do, especially in some of the leadership positions I've been, is set goals for myself. So basically, when I was the news director, I would, first of all, try and get like my feet under me, make sure I was doing the things the news directors before me did, and then do those. And then I'd be like, all right, well, we're struggling in this category in this. Let's focus really hard on this. Let's focus on that. Setting goals, individual goals. And that doesn't have to be like, my goal is I want to get married one day or something like that. My goal would be like, make it through the end of the week. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's get some individual goals in there. Something that keep me motivated and keep me engaged in my current job. Obviously, I have long-term goals that are like, I want to be here and doing this, but it's like, I want to do this and I want to do this well by the end of the week. Trying to keep myself engaged and growing as an individual where I am right now. That's probably my biggest thing that I try and do often, and my biggest advice to anybody.
To me, the biggest thing is being flexible, rolling with the punches, and just knowing when to take an opportunity, when not to take one, like Danielle mentions, time management. If this is what you want to do, you'll be happy in it, but you do have to put in the work to be successful.
Can I add in one more note? So kind of going off what Andrew said, if you like, I'm just talking specifically about like on-air TV people because that's what I do. But if you're in college and you just want to be in news because you want to be on TV, you might want to reconsider, because this is literally like, Andrew's on TV longer than I am, but I'm literally on TV for maybe 40 seconds a day. And it's a lot of work that goes into that. Like I've literally been working during this. So that's just a note that I've noticed, because at my old market, I'm hearing now from photographers that I worked with that literally all the new reporters, they just want to be on TV and they don't understand how to write. So, and I also want to shout you guys out for being here, and Ashley, you too, because doing things like this shows that you're dedicated to this field and that you want to get better.
Yeah, echoing the if you just want to be on TV part, I'm on a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, I'm on television for 3 minutes and 30 seconds out of an 8-hour shift. And the rest of my day is doing stuff that is not on television. And sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's not, but it's work. So don't do this just to put on a dress, makeup, a suit and makeup, and drive a fancy car and be a star, because that is not what this is.
Well, I think we can end off on that. Is there anything else? Lindsay and Mackenzie, what do you feel? We can end off with y'all. We'll end off with y'all and then we done. What y'all feel?
I really appreciate all y'all's knowledge, and as y'all have been talking, I've been like jotting little notes down, because I guess I didn't realize how much networking kind of went into finding a career. And although I did know it was really important, I didn't realize how vital it was. So I guess that's all I want to say. So I really appreciate all y'all's hard work and being on here to inform and educate students about this. So yeah.
As I also wanted to say thank you guys so much for being here. When it comes to like media arts and navigating like the industry, there's really no roadmap. Everybody has to like find their own way. And so there are just so many questions that I have constantly that pop up in my mind, but just like sitting here with you guys today helps me get a better understanding of, you know, the way that it's going to be when I enter the job market, and like the steps that I can put in to set myself ahead. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time to explain that to us.